Hello everyone, welcome to Cash Crop TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires, where we will be covering all of the major world empires throughout history in the style or through the inspiration of Gibbon's Decline and the Fall of the Roman Empire. I got this set for 150-year-old set for $150, so I'm still only on volume 1. However, it's sort of the inspiration that goes behind this series as I endeavor to learn about all the major world empires and endeavor as well to share it with you. So the structure of this series is that we will go through two empires in each episode, as well as highlight two leaders from each respective empire. As well, based on my other previous series and in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, we will also at the end have a comparison between the two leaders, so perhaps to learn, at least for me, perhaps how I could become a better leader myself or a better person myself, and I hope that you might be able to take something away from that portion of the episodes as well. So for this episode, we will be covering Nebuchadnezzar II of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and Croesus of the Lydian Empire. So these are two very, very key empires that really have tied into some of the previous empires that we've covered, specifically, for example, the Neo-Assyrian Empire and the Median Empire, which we covered in the previous episode, which I hope you have or will endeavor to check out. So without further ado, we will start with the Neo-Babylonian Empire and then continue to the Lydian Empire. So the Neo-Babylonian Empire, also known as the Chaldean Empire. So the Chaldeans were one specific tribe of Babylon that came to rule over the Babylonians, and as we should see, many other regions as well. They were a significant Mesopotamian civilization that emerged in the late 7th century BCE, before Common Era or before Christian Era, as it is both called, and lasted until the conquest of Babylon by the Persian Empire in 539 BCE. Therefore, we will seek to find a detailed account of the rise and fall and share it here. So starting with the rise of the Neo-Babylonian Empire from 626 to 605 BCE, and quick side note, we have previously covered the Old Babylonian Empire, so I hope you endeavor to or have checked that episode out as well. However, these do not need to be watched in chronological order. You can learn about the Neo-Babylonian Empire before the Old Babylonian Empire. So starting with the fall of Assyria, and it's from 626 to 612 BCE, and this is near the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which we have also covered. So the rise of the Neo-Babylonian Empire was closely linked to the decline of the mighty Neo-Assyrian Empire. In 626 BCE, Nabopolassar, a Chaldean leader, rebelled against the Assyrians in southern Mesopotamia, establishing the foundation for the Neo-Babylonian state. So I find this episode fits very well with the previous one, because what happened was the Chaldeans made an alliance with the Medians to defeat the Neo-Assyrian Empire. So we covered just recently the Neo-Assyrian Empire and the Medians, so this is sort of the keystone character, which is the Chaldeans, who were the leading tribe of Babylonia, who defeated, ultimately, with the Medians, the Neo-Assyrian Empire. So forming, at this period, the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And the leader was Nabopolassar. So for the expansion, and later to the Golden Age from 605 to 526 BCE, it's the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned from 605 to 562 BCE. He was the most famous ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and we will have a specific biography on him shortly. He ascended to the throne in 605 BCE, and his reign marked the pinnacle of Babylonian power. As for rebuilding Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar undertook extensive construction projects in Babylon, including the famed Hanging Gardens, the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is featured in one of the famous places that Alexander the Great later conquers, and which were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So the ancient world, because I think, as far as I can recall, the only wonder of the ancient world that still exists are the pyramids of Giza However, the other 6 have been unfortunately destroyed, and what a marvelous sight. We can imagine or I can personally imagine the Hanging Gardens of Babylon to have been. As for Nebuchadnezzar's military conquest, he conducted military campaigns in various directions, expanding the empire's border. He conquered parts of modern-day Israel and Judah, and famously took Jerusalem in 586 BCE, leading to the Babylonian captivity of the Jewish population. Much of this is I'm currently reading through the Old Testament in the King James Bible. I'm currently on the book of Jeremiah, so there's been many references to the Babylonian rule over the Israelites and the tribe and Judah. But moving to the decline and fall of the Babylonian Empire from 562 to 539 BCE. So despite the power and despite the influence, it's quite a short-lived empire, the Neo-Babylonian Empire. As for successors and weaknesses, after Nebuchadnezzar II's death in 562 BCE, the empire faced a series of weak rulers. This period saw internal strife, economic difficulties, and military setbacks. So if they had consecutive leaders, perhaps as great as Nebuchadnezzar II, maybe it never would have fallen. But maybe Nebuchadnezzar II should have done so, either trained his descendants better or set better policies to make sure that this wouldn't have happened. So maybe he is, to some extent, at fault, but we will cover him more in the specific biography. Furthermore, there was the conflict with the Achaemenid Empire, or the Persian Empire. Cyrus the Great of Persia, who had been expanding his empire, turned his attention to Babylon. In 539 BCE, Cyrus launched a successful military campaign against Babylon, culminating in the Battle of Opis. And he also, at this time, Cyrus the Great also defeated the Median Empire that we recently covered. So, sort of to visualize it, we have this. The Neo-Assyrian Empire was perhaps at the time the most powerful empire. Then the Babylonians and the Medians, their help took over, but the Neo-Babylonians were more powerful during the peak of Nebuchadnezzar II than the Medians, but nonetheless next came Cyrus the Great of Persia, or the Achaemenid Empire, who overthrew them both. As for the fall of Babylon in 539 BCE, the city of Babylon fell to the Persian forces led by Cyrus the Great. The capture of Babylon was aided by the diversion of the Euphrates River, allowing Persian troops to enter the city through dry riverbeds. So that is quite an advanced form of warfare. So they diverted the Euphrates River to bring their soldiers on foot. As for the legacy and aftermath of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, with the fall of Babylon, the Neo-Babylonian Empire came to an end, and Mesopotamia became part of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. The Persians, under Cyrus the Great, were generally more tolerant rulers, so perhaps maybe it was the way they ruled that allowed them to last longer, allowing various conquered peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands. So also one of the great books that I don't have with me here, but is Herodotus' The Histories, and he does show that Cyrus the Great, despite his military conquests, did have a certain level of empathy. For example, as we shall see, he lets Nebuchadnezzar II live, at least for a time. So thus, the Neo-Babylonian Empire left a significant mark on history, particularly in the fields of astronomy, mathematics, and architecture. Their famed ziggurats and astronomical observations laid the foundation for later advancement in these fields. The empire's Code of Hammurabi must be noted. This came from the Old Babylonian Empire. However, it was maintained in the Neo-Babylonian Empire. It was an early legal code and also holds historical importance as one of the earliest known systems of written law. So, if there was no Neo-Babylonian Empire, maybe the Code of Hammurabi would have been lost in existence. And it's also, so we'll discuss this in the slide, but it's also the fame. Supposedly this might have been the time when the Great Tower of Babel was constructed. So this is perhaps one of the pinnacles of civilizations as observed by those in the region, or perhaps even by God. So as for biography of Nebuchadnezzar the Great, some refer to him as well, but that title is given to many people. It was given, for example, to you the Great. The Zia Empire. It's given certainly to Cyrus the Great, certainly to Alexander the Great, but nonetheless, we can be somewhat liberal with giving that title. So the most important ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire was Nebuchadnezzar II, also known as Nebuchadnezzar the Great. He reigned from 605 BCE to 562 BCE, so quite a long period. That would be 43 years, and played a pivotal role in shaping the empire's zenith. Thus, we will seek to provide a detailed biography of his life. For perhaps different biography, I would also recommend the histories by Herodotus, where he goes into some more detail on specific events. As for his early life and ascension, from 600 prior to 605 BCE, so 634 BCE to 605 BCE, assuming 634 was his birthday. So Nebuchadnezzar II was born likely in 634 BCE, and he was the son of Nabopolassar. So Nabopolassar was the one who united or joined up or made an alliance with the Medians to defeat the Neo-Assyrian Empire. So his father was a great military figure as well, but also great in terms of forming alliances. He was therefore the founder of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, Nebuchadnezzar II's father. He belonged to the Chaldean tribe, which was the leading tribe of the Babylonians, which played a significant role in the rise of the Babylonian state. As a young prince, Nebuchadnezzar was involved in various military campaigns alongside his father, so getting early exposure, gaining valuable experience in warfare and leadership, so he did not live a sheltered youth of a prince. In 605 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar ascended the throne after the death of his father. He inherited an empire in the making, with the Assyrian Empire in decline and Babylon positioned as its natural successor, because it was more powerful than the Medians. As for the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, from 605 to 562 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar embarked on a series of ambitious projects to consolidate and expand the empire. His reign is often considered the golden age of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. As for his architectural achievements, Nebuchadnezzar is famously credited for the construction of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, and unfortunately 6 of which no longer exist. While there is some debate about their exact location and even existence, they remain as a symbol of the opulent rule. So maybe they never existed, but the fact that people were sharing stories of this, at least we can assume they had some opulence or greatness. But I like to imagine it existed. I don't think such a rumor could have been faked. As for military campaigns, Nebuchadnezzar conducted successful military campaigns expanding the empire's territory far beyond his father's conquests. His conquest of Jerusalem in 586 BCE is particularly notable, leading to Babylonian captivity of the Jewish population, which is biographed detail in the Old Testament. As for cultural and scientific achievements, Nebuchadnezzar was a patron of the arts and science. He supported scholarly pursuits, including advancements in astronomy and mathematics. The Babylonian astronomical observations during his reign were highly influential. So by promoting the sciences, not only does it sort of create sort of peace amongst the population, but even in warfare, having advanced sort of knowledge, particularly of mathematics, certainly had its benefits. As for his later years and legacy, from 562 up into his death in 562 BCE. In his later years, Nebuchadnezzar faced challenges related to succession and internal stability. So despite the greatness in his own life, his own quite rather long life, particularly for the time, he wasn't too great in making his descendants have definitive control. His successors struggled to maintain the same level of prosperity and authority that he had. So that is maybe for all his greatness, he was not so great in his succession planning. Thus, Nebuchadnezzar II died in 562 BCE after a remarkably long reign and prosperous reign of 43 years. He left behind a rich cultural and architectural legacy influencing subsequent generations, including perhaps one of the 7 great wonders of the world, maybe even the Tower of Babylon. His name and achievements were celebrated in inscriptions and texts, and he was often depicted in royal inscriptions as a powerful and God-favored ruler. So something that is common, as we see particularly in the Egyptian empires. As for his historical significance, Nebuchadnezzar II's reign marked the peak of the Neo-Babylonian Empire's power and influence. His contributions to Babylonian culture, architecture, and scholarship continue to be the subject of historical interest and admiration. His conquests, particularly the capture of Jerusalem, had lasting implications for the Jewish people, influencing their religious and cultural identity, and as perhaps the Old Testament is the most read book of all time, significant place in the annals of written history. The Tower of Babel, and perhaps the Tower of Babel was also created in his time, but there's also, depending on the translation of the Old Testament one reads, maybe the tower was just a great city, not necessarily a tower itself. But we shall do that, we'll discuss that as we discuss the content of the slide. So the title we have here is Nebuchadnezzar II of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. We could also call it the Chaldean Empire because they come from the Chaldeans, who were the leading tribes of Babylon. And it's considered the last polity ruled by monarchs native to Mesopotamia. So that's something very significant, because after this the Achaemenid Empire comes in, or the Persians. As for the information we have on the slide, significant leader, Nebuchadnezzar II, Empire, Neo-Babylonian, region, modern region is Iraq, Syria, and Jordan. Million square kilometers, 0.50, so very large, but a little smaller perhaps than, for example, the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Million square miles, 0.50%. Of the world, 0.37%. That's excluding Antarctica, but we must note that this is some of the most contested land in the ancient world, as according to the history as we have it, written testimonies. Capital city was predominantly Babylon, and for a period Tama, which was the de facto capital from 553 to 543 BCE, during the battles with the Persians and Cyrus the Great. Government, monarchy, and perhaps even with sort of religious authority too, or a godlike connection between the king and the gods. Common languages, Akkadian, which is most notably connected with the Neo-Assyrians, but it was also the prominent language of the Neo-Babylonians, as well as Aramaic. Religion, ancient Mesopotamian. Population was likely in the few millions, so one of the larger as well that we've seen. So as for images, in the top left we have a stele, which is supposedly Nebuchadnezzar standing on the Great Ziggurat, which has also been considered connected or even to be the Tower of Babel itself. So I know it's difficult to see, but that is a depiction we have of him, an ancient depiction, so it would be negligent not to include it. To the right of that we have the symbol of the sun god Shamash, who is one of the ancient Mesopotamian gods that was revered and passed down from the Akkadian period to the Neo-Babylonians. So despite conquering the Neo-Assyrians and those peoples, they still retained those ancient Mesopotamian gods, and this was one of the major ones of the Neo-Babylonians. To the right of that we have a depiction of the famous Lucas van Valkenborch painting of what he envisioned the Tower of Babel might have looked like, and this is a famous painting in the Louvre. It was painted in 1594, 1594 CE, Common Era or Christian Era. But there are debates whether there even was a Tower of Babel. Furthermore, during what period was it in the Neo-Babylonian period, or was it perhaps in the Old Babylonian period, is up to debate, and some translations, depending on how one translates the ancient language. It's different from Hebrew, but it's got many parallels to modern Hebrew nonetheless. Because, for example, it excludes vowels, but nonetheless some say it might have just been a great city. But either way, the story is still true, or it still holds that the city or the tower was too great, so God had it destroyed. Part of the story, as what I've read, is that it was also sort of too multicultural, was one of the criticisms, and that was one of the reasons it might have needed to be destroyed by God. But there's much that can be read into that short passage in the Old Testament. Below that we have some ruins in modern day Iraq, so it looks really quite beautiful. I'd like to visit that someday. To the right we have a beautiful image, I find, of the Hanging Gardens with the Tower of Babel similarly depicted as Lucas van Valkenborch in the background. So this is a beautiful image of what the tower, the gardens, hanging gardens of Babylon might have looked like. And if that's what it looked like, I would be absolutely amazed to see that. And it was considered one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. Above that, we have a map of the region at the peak of the Neo-Babylonian power. So as we can see, it extends all the way through Israel, all the way through Gaza, modern day Palestine, starting from Babylon, but does not have the Egypt regions, and much of the region in between is also under Persian rule, but it extends all the way up into Turkey, quite far into Turkey as well. So a massive region, and a very powerful and very keystone empire that sort of transitioned from the Neo-Assyrians, held a transition period, not for too long, less than 100 years they even ruled, but with the help of the Medians, defeated the Neo-Assyrians, came to rule a massive extent of land, created perhaps the Great Tower of Babel and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, two of the most famous architectural achievements, supposedly, in history, and then, unfortunately, with the Medians as well, defeated by the Achaemenid Empire, or Cyrus the Great. And I recommend one reads Herodotus, the histories. He has a specific biography of some of these details. But, pardon me, Herodotus, but he actually goes into more detail on Croesus, as we shall cover very soon. So, without further ado, we will move to the next empire, the Lydian Empire, and Croesus, who is famous and probably more highlighted in, he's specifically highlighted in Herodotus' histories. So the Lydian Empire, located in ancient Anatolia, which is in modern-day Western Turkey, emerged as a significant power in the late 7th century BCE. Therefore, we will seek to find a detailed history of its rise and fall. So it's very important because it also borders on Media, it also borders on Thrace, and in terms of the dates, it's dated back as far as 1200 BCE. So they've been touching history for a very, very long time. But it's considered an empire for a shorter period, which is from Gyges in 685 BCE. That's why I didn't put it earlier. It comes closer when it was a powerful empire to the time of the Neo-Babylonians. So, as for its early history, from circa 1200 to 685 BCE, the region of Lydia, known for its rich resources, had been inhabited since the Bronze Age. By the 7th century BCE, Lydia was comprised by a series of city-states and small kingdoms, so not united. So during this period, I wouldn't consider it yet an empire, although these city-states were influential and powerful, such as Smyrna, Ephesus, and Miletus. And it also must be noted that later Troy is also included in this region, but we wouldn't consider the Trojan Empire part of the Lydian Empire, but they were in the region, but far before. And also we wouldn't consider Troy an empire too, it would be a city-state. So as for Gyges and the Myrmidon dynasty from circa 685 to 546 BCE, the Lydian Empire's rise is closely associated with King Gyges, who overthrew the last Heraclid rulers in Lydia around 685 BCE. Gyges established the Myrmidon dynasty after his ancestor Myrmidons. As for the conquest of the Ionian cities, the Athenians are considered racially the Ionian, important to note, which differs racially, supposedly according to Thucydides, from the Spartans, for example. So conquest of the Ionian cities, circa 670 to 560 BCE. Under Gyges and his successors, Lydia expanded its territory by conquering the Ionian Greek cities along the Aegean coast. This brought wealth and prestige to the Lydian state. A quick side note, because I mentioned race within Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War, he does note that it was not a war based on race. So although the Athenians were Ionian and the Spartans were not, they were actually sort of more traditionally what is thought of as the Greeks, or descendants even from Hercules, for example. There were Ionians on the Spartan sides and non-Ionians on the Athenian side. So Thucydides it's interesting to note, and this is perhaps one of the oldest books of all time, or oldest history books of all time. He notes that the battle between War and Sparta was not one fought on race. So that's just something to note. But nonetheless, in 670 BCE, Lydia conquered Troy, or conquered so many Ionian cities. Troy did come later as well. But nonetheless, the Lydian Empire also came long after the Peloponnesian War. As for peak of power and Croesus, circa 595 to 546 BCE, starting with Croesus's reign, circa 595 to 546 BCE. The most famous ruler of Lydia was King Croesus, who ascended to the throne in 595 BCE. He expanded Lydia's territory, making it the dominant power in Anatolia. So the Anatolians were also considered maybe even racially separate from the Ionians too. So, but it's race is a difficult topic. A recent scholar that I've been following, he says that one must not look retroactively at race. So race is formed when states are separated. So when a state separates, that is when a race is formed. Whereas trying to trace back is maybe even a racist thing. But nonetheless, are just details that should not be overlooked, that these people did have different there were different perceptions amongst people. Yes, I'll just leave it there. As for cultural and economic prosperity, under Croesus, Sardis, the capital of Lydia, became a renowned center of culture and wealth. The Lydians were known for their skilled metalworking, particularly in gold and silver. As for alliances with the Greeks, Croesus formed alliances with various Greek city-states, including Sparta and Athens, who sought to maintain Lydia's influence in the region. So I really recommend one reads the history of the Peloponnesian War, and I will likely cover that as well. As for the fall of the Lydian Empire in 546 BCE, the conflict with Persia. So the Lydian Empire faced a formidable adversary in the rising Achaemenid Persian Empire led by Cyrus the Great. Cyrus's conquest in 546 BCE, Cyrus launched a campaign to conquer Lydia. The two armies clashed at the Battle of Thymbra, resulting in a decisive victory for the Persians. So not only did the Persians, with Cyrus the Great, defeat the Neo-Babylonian Empire, as we mentioned, but they are also the ones to lead to the decline of the Lydian Empire. So Cyrus the Great, I think, at least he might not have been the most moral character, but as we'll see, he did have a certain level of empathy, or at least according to Herodotus. As for capture of Sardis, after the battle, Sardis fell to Persian forces. Croesus was captured, and the Lydian Empire became part of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. So he was captured, but not killed, at least right away, which is maybe he was being empathetic, or maybe Croesus would have rather have died. But it seemed as though they actually, according to Herodotus' histories, even had somewhat of a decent relationship, or at least a respectful relationship. As for legacy and aftermath, integration into the Persian Empire. The Lydian territories became part of the Satrapy, which is a province. There are satraps who, satrapy is a province, and satraps ruled over provinces, part of the Persian ruling mechanism, which we will cover in a following episode, of Lydia within the Persian Empire. Despite this, Lydia maintained a distinct cultural identity within the larger Persian realm. So they were not just completely submerged. They did not completely get their culture destroyed. As for cultural contributions, the Lydians, known for their wealth and prosperity, left a lasting impact on ancient Greek culture. Their gold coins and silver coins, and mixture of gold and silver coins known as Lydian staters, became a standard currency in the ancient Mediterranean. For historical significance, the rise and fall of the Lydian Empire marked a significant chapter in the ancient history of Anatolia. It also played a role in the larger context of the Persian Empire's expansion in the Near East. As for Greek accounts, much of our knowledge of Lydia comes from ancient Greek sources, as the Lydians were in close contact with the Greek city-states, but not necessarily considered part of Greece. They're beyond Thrace, for example. particularly those in the Ionian region. Herodotus, the Greek historian, provides valuable information about Lydia and its rulers in his work titled The Histories. The Lydian Empire's rise and fall exemplify the dynamic geopolitical landscape of ancient Anatolia and its interactions with neighboring powers. So also a very, very important empire to understand, especially as how they interacted with Sparta and Athens, who we will cover as well, who are two very important Greek city-states that even clashed amongst themselves and formed probably maybe one of the most important wars in history. But it's very important to understand the Lydians, especially since they bordered on Medea. They were also defeated by Cyrus the Great, who was a key figure throughout in terms of influencing many of these empires. And Croesus is one of the first leaders that Herodotus covers in history, so this is still very, very ancient history. So now we will go into a specific biography of Croesus, the significant king of Lydia, circa 595 to 546 BCE. But once again, I recommend one also reads Herodotus' The History for a specific detailed sort of account of some of the particular events in Croesus' life. Croesus was one of the most renowned figures of the ancient world. His reign marked the peak of Lydia's power and influence in Anatolia. He was also, however, the last king of Lydia. As for his early life and ascension, from 595 BCE, Croesus, also known as Croesus in Greek, was born around 595 BCE to King Alyattes II, the ruler of Lydia, and an unknown mother, so royal blood he had. He likely ascended to the throne after the death of his father, Alyattes II, around 595 BCE. That cannot be right. So either his birth date was 595 BCE or his ascension date was 595 BCE. I think more likely that was his ascension date, unless he only lived 51 years. So I think his ascension date was 595 BCE, but maybe he ascended very young too. But nonetheless, he died. He was defeated, or in 546 BCE. The early years of his rule were spent consolidating his power and expanding Lydia's influence. As for his reign and achievements, Croesus ruled over Lydia for approximately 14 years. So then 595 BCE would be his birth date, during which he undertook various campaigns and initiatives that brought prosperity to the region and renown to his kingdom. As for his conquests and expansion, Croesus continued his father's policy of territorial expansion, which is something relatively new for the Lydians, or particularly those from Sardis, for the first 600 years of their history, from 1200 BCE to around 600 BCE. They weren't much of an empire, but under his father Alyattes II, and under his reign, they began to form a formal empire. He conquered various neighboring territories, including parts of Ionia and Aeolus, which extended Lydia's influence along the Aegean coast. As for his alliance with Greece, Croesus was known for his close ties with several Greek city-states, including Athens and Sparta. So both sides of the two conflicting states. But for much of his history, Athens and Sparta were even allies, particularly against the Persians, as we shall see. He provided financial support for these states, strengthening Lydia's influence in the Greek world. As for cultural prosperity and economic prosperity, Sardis, the capital of Lydia, flourished under Croesus. It became the hub of culture, wealth, and craftsmanship. The Lydians were particularly known for their advanced metalworking, especially in gold and silver, and formed some of the first coins, known as Lydian starters. Croesus himself is credited with introducing standardized coinage, known as the Lydian starters. These coins, made of electrum, naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver, became widely accepted and influential in the ancient Mediterranean. Furthermore, his relations with the Oracle of Delphi, which is a place that I fortunately have been able to visit, which is absolutely a beautiful site in ancient Greece. Croesus famously consulted the Oracle of Delphi, seeking to ascertain the outcome of a potential war with the Persians. The oracle's ambitious response, which stated the great empire would fall, led to unforeseen consequences. So a detailed biography of that can be found in Herodotus's The Histories, but nonetheless it's quite a fascinating story how he was sort of confused and misinterpreted the response from the oracles of Delphi. As for his conflict with Persia and fall in 546 BCE, Croesus's reign took a fateful turn when he faced the rising power of the Achaemenid Empire, led by Cyrus the Great. As for his campaign against Persia, in 546 BCE, Croesus launched a campaign against Cyrus, and the two empires met in a battle near the Halys River. As for defeat and capture, the battle ended in a stalemate, and Croesus decided to withdraw, assuming that he had successfully defended his kingdom. However, Cyrus pursued and defeated the Lydian forces. As for his capture and fate, following the defeat, Croesus was captured by the Persians and brought before Cyrus. He was spared and allowed to serve as an advisor to the Persian court. So it seems as there was sort of mutual respect, but maybe it was torture to Croesus. But it seems, at least according to Herodotus' history, that Cyrus the Great was merciful. As for his legacy, Croesus' reign and subsequent capture became, and in fact, also may be evidence that Croesus was valuable enough to be kept by Cyrus the Great. So Croesus the reign, as for his legacies and subsequent capture, became the subject of numerous legends, particularly in Herodotus' histories and stories in ancient literature. He is often cited as a symbol of wealth and capriciousness of fortune. The fall of Lydia and the Persians marked the end of the independent Lydian kingdom, but Croesus' economic and cultural contributions endured, particularly in the field of coinage. Croesus' life and reign exemplify the complex dynamics of the Anatolia and its interactions with neighboring powers. His legacy resonates through the ages, serving as a cautionary tale about the transience of power and fortune. So we'll now discuss the content of the slide. So in terms of title, we have Croesus and the Lydian Empire, rulers of all Anatolia. As you can see. In terms of information, we have significant leader, Croesus, Empire, Lydia, period 1200 to 546 BCE. However, it wasn't an empire until around the 7th century BCE. Modern location, Turkey. It was considered an empire after Gyges. Million square kilometers, 0.5 million square miles. It should be fewer. In fact, it should be, well, it's fewer nonetheless. But percent of the world, 0.37. It's actually identical in size, supposedly, to that of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. But I would think, at least my source might be a little off in that I think the Neo-Babylonian Empire did cover more land. Percent of the world, 0.37, and that's excluding Antarctica. As for capital, Sardis. Government, monarchy. Common language, Lydian. Religion, Lydian religion. Population, hundreds of thousands. So a little smaller than some of the empires we previously covered in terms of population, but still quite significant and impressive that they were able to conquer so much with a population of less than 1 million, supposedly. As for images, in the top left, we have a famous image of Croesus. Very fascinating image, and we can see even how much the art has started to develop throughout some of these empires, so it's quite detailed. To the right of that, we have the famous gymnasium complex of Sardis. Below that, we have the Tripolis on Meander, which is an ancient Lydian city in Turkey. Below that, to the right, we have the Pactolus River, where Lydians obtained electrum, which was a combination of gold and silver. Below that, we have some ruins of another famous city in ancient Turkey, which is in Anatolia, which was Lydian territory. They were known for having these famous pillars. I believe it's also a temple of Artemis as well, which is one of the gods they worshipped. To the far right, we have coins. On the top, we have a combination of electrum, which is, in this case, 1/3 silver starter domination, and the rest part being gold. Below that, we have gold coins, and below that, we have a silver Croesid, which is named after Croesus. So those are some of the coins, which is one of the key contributions of the Lydians. And above that, we have a map. See the area it covers. See how it borders right on the Median Empire, which we just covered, and I hope you endeavor or have checked out. And as we can see at the expand, they even covered territories of former Troy, Smyrna, Ephesus, and Miletus, all very important city-states, and Sardis, the capital. Not all in the Mediterranean itself, so inland, which differs from many of the city-states they conquered. So that is Croesus and the Lydian Empire. We will now discuss a comparison between Nebuchadnezzar II of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and Croesus of the Lydian Empire. Nebuchadnezzar II of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and Croesus of the Lydian Empire were two prominent rulers of the ancient Near East who lived during roughly the same period in the 6th century BCE and presided over powerful empires. Despite their geographical and cultural differences, they shared some similarities but also exhibited distinct characteristics. As for their similarities, the period of their reign, both Nebuchadnezzar II and Croesus were prominent figures in the 6th century BCE, a time of significant geopolitical shifts and power struggles in the Near East, particularly with the coming of the great Cyrus the Great and the Persian or the Achaemenid Empire, which we will cover. As for cultural contributions, both rulers were known for their contributions to art, culture, and architecture. Nebuchadnezzar II is celebrated for the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, while Croesus is associated with the introduction of standardized coinage. So, although maybe the Hanging Gardens of Babylon might have been more appealing, standardized coinage might have been more long-lasting or more influential. As for cultural contributions, we just did cultural contributions. As for expansionist policies, both Nebuchadnezzar II and Croesus pursued aggressive expansionist policies, seeking to consolidate their empires and extend their influence over neighboring regions. As for their relations with Greece, both rulers had interactions with Greek city-states. Nebuchadnezzar II is known for the capture of Jerusalem and Babylonian captivity of the Jewish population. Croesus maintained close ties with several Greek city-states as well, providing them with financial support. So, Nebuchadnezzar maybe they both conquered other city-states, but maybe the conquering of Jerusalem and the Israelites or the Jewish population maybe was more significant, at least, or more written about according to the Old Testament, or as per the Old Testament. But nonetheless, both negotiated and dealt with Greek city-states. As for some differences, their geographical origins, Nebuchadnezzar II was the ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire located in Mesopotamia, which is in modern-day Iraq. He hailed from a region with a long history of ancient civilizations, including the Sumerians and the Babylonians, and the Old Babylonian Empire. Croesus was the ruler of Lydia, an empire in Anatolia, which is in modern-day Turkey. Lydia was known for its wealth and played a significant role in the Aegean world, interacting with Greek city-states, but the Lydians were really from particularly Sardis, and nonetheless came to rule over a larger area of land. As for their empire's size and influence, the Neo-Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar II was a vast empire that included parts of modern-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. It was one of the dominant powers of the Near East. As for the Lydian Empire under Croesus, was located in western Anatolia, and though it was wealthy and influential, it did not have the territorial extent or historical significance of Babylonia. So, going back to previously, the Neo-Babylonian Empire is likely, or was certainly, larger than the Lydian Empire. So my apologies if those figures were off. As for architectural achievements, Nebuchadnezzar II is famed for his extensive contribution to projects in Babylon, including the famous Hanging Gardens, which are considered one of the 7 ancient wonders of the ancient world. So if I could go back in time, I would absolutely love to see them, and maybe even find out that they were less impressive, as rumor has told us. Croesus's notable contributions was the introduction of the standardized coinage known as the Lydian starters, which revolutionized trade and commerce in the ancient world. That's why they were known as a wealthy state. But nonetheless, conflict and fate, Nebuchadnezzar II faced significant military challenges. He included the conquest of Jerusalem and clashes with neighboring powers like the Assyrians and Egyptians, defeating the Assyrians and clashing with the Egyptians. He was succeeded by a line of rulers who struggled to maintain the empire's prosperity. Ultimately, his descendants were defeated by Cyrus the Great. Croesus' reign took a dramatic turn when he faced the rising Persian Empire led by Cyrus the Great. After his defeat, Croesus was captured but spared, eventually serving as an advisor to Cyrus. So, nonetheless, the Nebuchadnezzar II maybe held off Cyrus the Great for a bit, but eventually nonetheless, the Neo-Babylonians were defeated by Cyrus the Great, whereas it was within Croesus' lifetime that they were defeated by Cyrus the Great. Thus, while both Nebuchadnezzar II and Croesus were influential rulers of their time, they ruled over different empires with distinct cultural, geographic, and historical contexts. Their contributions to art, culture, and politics left a lasting empire in the annals of ancient history. So, at least for me, these are two really necessary empires to cover, just to sort of get a picture of sort of the fall of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the Median Empire, and sort of the Neo-Babylonian Empire coming in, encroaching upon the Neo-Assyrian Empire. And as well, we have Lydia expanding out here, even expanding, and then ultimately then the Persian Empire came and sort of almost took them all. So we will cover that, and I hope you look forward to that empire and episode as well, as much as I do. So thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires. My name is Kalen Ashcroft, and I hope you continue to support. Thank you very much.